Well, I am so excited to be here today with you guys, specifically to give this message. Now this has fallen. There we go. Specifically to give this message, because if you would have told me 2 years ago that I would be here at NET giving the new customer approach, I absolutely would not have believed you. Because 2 years ago, I was in a completely different situation in like every aspect. 2 years ago, I was not selling nearly as much as I wanted to. I wanted to be selling, $300,000. Like 2 years ago, my first year as a CSP, I went out and I was like, I'm gonna sell $300,000 this year. I was like, I'm gonna do it, right, as my first year, and I came nowhere close. I sold like $198,000, and that might seem like a lot, but like it was not, right? It did not feel good. It wasn't exciting to me. And yeah, I just was not in an exciting place in my business that I felt was, exciting for me. And I just remember, feeling not good almost every time I went to an event. I remember feeling super like I would cross my fingers and hope that the event would go well. Has anyone ever felt that way? Where you're like, man, I sure hope the right people walk up to me. Man, I sure hope that I just get that easy customer, that easy couple that's looking for knives, that wants knives. And it didn't happen too often. Sometimes it happened. It happened enough for me to be like, okay, like I could probably keep doing this, right? Like you sometimes do get an easy sale where you're like, okay, cool, that felt pretty good. And then, but it doesn't happen too often. I remember just being in a place where I was like, this is so not fun, hoping and crossing my fingers that the event was gonna go well, right? I would hope and pray, and I just got so sick of it, right? I got sick of not having a consistent paycheck. I got sick of having like a $300 average order, and I got really just sick and tired of feeling lousy. I was super close to leaving the business before I had ever really even given it a shot, right? That's what I realized, was that I didn't even really try. I remember having a conversation with a mentor of mine, and I was just feeling so lousy, and I was like, man, I don't know if this is exciting. I don't know if this is what I want to do. And they were like, you haven't even tried. And I kind of got like, my ego got a little big. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I've been working so hard. I've been going to all these events. And they're like, yeah, you've been going through the motions, but you haven't really tried to get better. And I had to take a really hard look in the mirror and be like, dang, you're right, right? I didn't try to improve myself the way I should have. Right? I had to take a hard look and be like, yeah, I probably can't just rely on talent and being fun and personable anymore, right? Because most people that get into events, it's because you're decent at demos, right? You're decent at working with people, right? You're pretty personable, and you kind of rely on that. And you don't, most people don't initially work on their script because they're like, well, I'm good at this. Like, I've sold some Cutco, I've done demos and service calls and whatever. And I realized that that was totally me, was that I was like relying on this like, talent or this, fun that I thought I brought with customers, and it just was not gonna get me to where I wanted to be. It was not gonna get me to that $300,000 level that I wanted to be at. So what did I do? I doubled down and I just worked on my craft for not that long, right? Like, I'm still a work in progress. I will be the first one to shout that I still have a ton of area of opportunity to grow in my business. But I do remember I spent like 2 to 3 months just working on my craft, improving my skill set. I made a commitment to listen to at least 30 minutes of some type of Vector Connect audio every single day for like 2.5 months. Every single day. And I really did that. That was the first time, I think, in my entire Cutco experience that I actually did something for that many days in a row. Like, I remember being on a camping trip in the middle of nowhere, and I had to like pre-save audios on my phone because I was like, I have to listen to these even while I'm on vacation, right? And that's what I did, right? I remember I, recorded myself giving my new customer approach, right? Doing the script, recorded it, listened to it back. I was able to like write it out, start to finish, backwards to forwards, so many times that I was like, I need to get better at this because I'm so sick of just not feeling great. And that's what I did. So I went from, literally in 2.5 months, I went from my average order being like $300 at the booth all the way up to $700 in 2 months, just from working on my script, right? And now today it's over $900 at the booth, right? That was 2 years ago. So if you would have told me 2 years ago that I'd be here giving this message, I would not have believed you. And the only reason that I bring this up is just to stress the fact that it's not magic, it's all manufactured, right? Every single person that is up on this stage all week this week, none of it's magic. They're not just some Cutco guru, right? Even Curtis, right? It's all manufactured. And I have to give credit where credit is due. I didn't come up with pretty much anything I'm gonna, share today. Maybe like one thing, but 99% of the things that I've gotten good at are just things that I have learned from the other greats in Cutco, and they would probably tell you the same thing, right? Josh, Luke, Curtis, Seth, Kelly, Bert, these people that I've learned a ton from, they'd probably tell you the exact same thing was, I didn't create it, it's just stuff that I learned. So the people that are great are the people that get really good at implementing the things that they learn, right? I also share this just to ask for some, commitment and understanding that everyone here, I'm sure you've heard this, I think we've heard this just yesterday, is that growth is not guaranteed. I think Bert talked about that. Just because you come to a conference to learn does not mean you're for sure gonna grow, right? Maybe you'll have a realization like me where you're like, man, I really just need to double down and get better at my craft and get better at my skill set so I can improve, right? So is everyone on board with that? All right. So today, the main thing we're gonna talk about are the 3 keys to effectively working with new customers. Okay, so you're gonna get my script at the end, the actual script that I use. I'm not gonna talk a ton about in-depth detail of the script because I could talk for 2 hours on that, breaking down why we say every little line. We don't have time for that. So I wanna talk about the 3 main keys that I have found really have helped me working with new customers, because I've learned, maybe you're the same way, that once you understand the why behind what you're saying in a few main areas, it's a lot easier to implement and a lot easier to actually put that into practice, okay? So, 3 main keys, there we go. So write these down. So we're gonna talk about creating the emotional buy-in with the customer. Creating the emotional buy-in, basically how to make the customer want the product. We heard Curtis talk about this yesterday, that's super important. Okay, the second thing we're gonna talk about is intentional value adds. When and where. So it's not just saying the right thing, I've found. It's being able, like Curtis talked about, being able to plug and play it at the right time to make the biggest impact for the customer in where you're at in your demo. Okay, and then the third thing we're gonna talk about is creating urgency. Talking about why the customer should buy today. Okay? All right, let's dive in. So the first thing we're gonna talk about, creating the emotional buy-in. All right, so why does this matter? Like, I keep referencing Curtis. I think he teed this up super well yesterday. The customer has to want the product. That's what we call the emotional buy-in. We need to speak to their emotional brain. So why does this matter? If you only speak to their logical brain, customer doesn't want it. Okay, a perfect example of this was, I remember after this, a year and a half ago now, after this crazy intense time I had with practicing my script and getting better, I remember working an event that was a big event, and I remember talking to my mentor Josh and being like, I have the best demo I've ever had. Like, I am on point, I am saying everything right, I'm doing it all, but I just feel like the customer is not wanting it. Like, I feel like I'm doing the demo and they're just like, all right, cool, wow, yeah, that sounds great, but yeah, I think we're good. And I'm like, what is the deal? Like, why aren't they wanting to buy this? And he just said, he was like, well, you're probably not speaking to their emotional brain. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, customers buy Cutco, it's an emotional decision when they buy that at the booth. So you have to speak to their emotional brain. You have to make them want the product. I'm like, okay, how do I do that? And he's like, well, you got to speak to their emotions. So he told me some pointers on how to actually get the customer to want the product, right? Because I was sick of getting to the end of the demo and then being like, cool, we're good, right? Yeah, that sounds amazing, great guarantee, but I think we're all good, right? So they have to want the product. So it's a need versus a want, right? We heard Curtis talk about this yesterday. If they need it, they're not gonna buy it. They have to want the product, okay? This is another Curtis quote. We always kick the can down the road for the things we need, but somehow we always figure out how to get the things that we want. right? It's a great line to use with customers when a customer comes up and they say, oh, we need some good knives. You're like, yeah, Mrs. Jones, how long have you needed good knives? Oh, 2 years? Isn't it funny how we always kick the can down the road for the things we need, but we always figure out how to get the things that we want, right? So Cutco is a spontaneous purchase. You have to speak to that. People buy based on emotion. So how can you actually put emotion into your demo? Where can you place that? How can you get them bought in versus just reading the script? Because there are intentional ways that you can put that in your demo. Okay, so where to create emotion within your demo. The first part is your initial demo, right? Who cuts leather at the booth? Everyone's hand should be raised, right? If you're not cutting leather, you're missing the boat. I cut leather right away in my demo, which you'll see in my script. I think that is the biggest wow factor for the customer to get them tied in of like, whoa, these things are sharp, okay? But how do you create emotion with that? When they cut the leather, simple questions like, wow, Mrs. Jones, isn't that amazing? Mrs. Jones, do you have any knives that cut like that at home? Let them think about it, right? You're not just telling them how great our product is. They need to relate it to their own experience that they have at home, right? They need to be able to relate, or else it's just a product that they could live without, right? So Mrs. Jones, do you have any knives that cut like that at home? Guess what they say? Nope, right? And now they're connecting emotionally. They're like, wow, no, I do not. They're thinking about their experience in their kitchen negatively. They're like, nope, my knives do not cut like that. Okay, the guarantee, when you talk about the guarantee, super easy way to create emotion. So Mrs. Jones, how long have your knives not been cutting it for you? And then they're thinking, oh my gosh, our knives have not been good for like 5 years. Or they'll be like, our knives have not been good since we got them for our wedding 20 years ago. Wow, so you've been thinking about getting good knives for a while then, huh? And now they're thinking, oh yeah, I guess I have been thinking about getting good knives for a while. Right? You're relating to their experience. You're not just telling, right? You're showing through their own emotions. Individual pieces, in my opinion, this is the best way for you to create want around the ultimate. Who wants to sell more ultimates? You have to create the desire around the ultimate pieces, right? So this was a big mistake I made for a long time, was I would just show the pieces and everyone's response was, yeah, that's way too many knives. I would never use those. Who's ever heard that from a customer, right? And then you go field training with some Cutco great, and they're selling ultimates like clockwork, and you're like, what the heck? Well, they're creating emotion around the pieces. They're creating desire, right? So let's say you are talking about the boning knife. So Mrs. Jones, do you ever notice when you cut chicken at home? Like, do you guys ever eat chicken? You do? Do you ever notice that when you cut chicken, you have to like, saw back and forth a few times, and it pulls and stretches, right? You give that look to them where you're like, it pulls and stretches, and every time the customer's like, oh yeah, right? Let them like actually answer the question. You don't want to just blow through it. You need them to relate to their experience. So do you ever notice that it just pulls and stretches and kind of tears the meat, and you have to saw back and forth a few times? Yeah, isn't that frustrating? Let them answer, yeah, that is really frustrating, relating to their negative experience. Mrs. Jones, do you ever know, like, do you guys ever do like a squash in the wintertime or like a sweet potato? You do? Aren't those like the hardest thing to cut through because they're so tough? Yeah, they are really hard. Well, check this one out. Insert, veggie knife or cleaver. So you're, again, relating to their negative experience and giving them a positive solution that is Cutco. That's how you create desire around the pieces. That's how when you get to the end of the ultimate pieces, the customer is like, yeah, that would be the set for me because I want it, right? It's not about what I need. It's about I want those pieces because those are going to make my life way easier in the kitchen, right? I want those, right? And then last thing, intentional power pauses. We kind of just talked about that, but making sure you are not blowing through the question. Right? Let them sit with it. It's really important to not just like blow through. And that's a lot easier once you have your script down, right? When you're not thinking about what to say next, right? What's the next line? But to be able to actually pause, look at the customer, read them, and be able to like let that sink in, whatever that intentional moment you're trying to have, right? An intentional power pause, okay? All right, let's talk about the next thing, intentional value adds. Intentional value adds. Okay, timing is everything. Who's heard that phrase before? Every one of us. I'm a big believer that in your demo, timing is everything. Again, a mistake I made early on was I would just kind of try to like blow through the script, right? Like Curtis talked about yesterday, someone comes up and we're just like right? And the customer's like, whoa, what's going on here? Like you're clearly just saying stuff that's in your head that I have no interest in, right? So when you have your script down well enough, like Curtis mentioned, you can plug and play the right things at the right moment, right? Things have to be intentional or else they don't carry as much weight where you say them, right? So timing's everything. Where can you add intentional value pieces into your demo? Where are these things gonna make the biggest impact for the customer? There's 3 things that I think are really important. There's a lot of things, but 3 main things. Okay, the first one is old/broken Cutco. Who has an old piece of Cutco at their booth? Okay, if your hand is not raised, that should be like a top priority for you leaving the event. So write down on your to-do list, hopefully you have a running to-do list, everyone write it down right now if you didn't raise your hand, get some old Cutco. And when I say old Cutco, I mean like really old, like 1950s, 1960s at the latest. It's great if the Cutco has like an older handle. Send it into the factory, get it sharpened, so it comes back sharp as heck, okay? Why is this important and same thing for a broken piece of Cutco, by the way. Next time you do a service call and a customer's got a melted handle, take it from them. Give them a new piece, 1/3 of them a new piece of Cutco, trade them for a, one that you have or whatever. But you need these 2 things at the booth, okay? The reason why is you have to like prove it to the customer. So you might talk about the guarantee and it's great, but for a new customer that doesn't own Cutco, when you tell them that there is a forever guarantee, right, and you say, yeah, Mrs. Jones, it's forever, you know what the customer thinks? Even if they don't say this out loud? Yeah, but is it really? Like, what do you mean? Like, forever? That's what they're thinking in their head. So you have to prove it to them. Even though Cutco's great and it's been around forever and we guarantee it, they don't. Right? So by showing them an old piece of Cutco that's super sharp, you have them cut leather with it, and then you say, hey, Mrs. Jones, if you had to guess, how old do you think that knife is? They're like, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years. And you're like, no, that's 67 years old. It's from 1958 or whatever. Right? The customer's like, that is so moving for the customer of, wow, that knife is older than I am. And it cuts amazing. Right? That's an intentional value add for the customer, talking about it during the guarantee, okay? Same thing with broken Cutco when you talk about the replacements. They've got to see it, right? Second thing is the service repair sheet. So you guys all got a handout, okay? Keep this handout. I can't stress this enough. Keep this handout and get it laminated as soon as you leave the event. You should all have this at your booth, okay? This is, I think, one of the biggest, wow factors in my demo for the customer, okay? And I place this very strategically within my demo. I used to share this sheet during the guarantee, and then I kind of felt like I was showing too much in the guarantee. Like by the time I got to the end of all 4 parts of the guarantee, the customer's like, yeah, so what are the sets? So I was like, I feel like there's a better place for this sheet. So now what I do is I show this sheet right after I go over a price comparison. Okay, and I know there's differing opinions on sharing a price comparison. I'm a big believer in sharing a price comparison, right, with other brands. I'm not gonna go into detail why, we don't have time for that, but if you want my opinion, come to my roundtable later, there's a little plug. But I share this right after I compare prices with other brands. Because when I'm talking about Cutco and I'm like, yeah, by the way, Mrs. Jones, we're guaranteed forever, blah, 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 we have the, sharpening, whatever, and then I pull this out. I'm like, and by the way, Mrs. Jones, this was actually a customer of ours. She had her set for 30 years. She sent them into the factory, and then check this out. I show her the sheet, and I'm like, she sent them into the factory. Some of them we sharpened. The rest of them were so dull and worn out that we just replaced. And look at the bottom. All she paid for, and I'm pointing, all she paid for was $11 for the shipping. Intentional power pause. You know what the customer does? Every single time they're like, wow. So what am I doing there? I'm wowing the customer, which is always good. And 2, this is right before I share prices. So what am I telling the customer? These are gonna be expensive, right? We learned this on like the first day of training, price value, right? They're expecting the price to be really high, and they are expensive, right? But when I share this, they're expecting, more than probably what it is. So I am telling them that, yep, these are gonna be expensive because they are one and done. This is like the biggest cherry on top of like, yep, Mrs. Jones, no matter what you do, one and done. Wow, right? The third thing, penny cutting. Okay, penny cutting, this is something I think I learned from Bert, was not cutting the penny right away. I did this for a long time, was like as soon as the customer would walk up to the booth, check it out, cut the penny, oh my gosh, isn't that amazing? And then they would just like leave a lot of the time, right? Because it's just like that fun trick, and they're like, wow, cool, see ya, they just got a penny, right? So saving the penny cutting for a more intentional time, I have found, has been really impactful, okay? So the penny cutting, I cut the penny now right after I share prices, which you'll see in my script, it's all in there, you'll get that at the end. Right, but right after I'm like, so it's normally blank, Cutco's got it on sale for blank, blah, 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 right? I let them sit with the price for like 3 seconds, and then I have a planned spontaneity moment where I'm like, oh, and by the way, I totally forgot to show you our best demo. And I grab the shears, and I'm like, check this out, and I cut the penny. Wow. Right? The customer, after they've heard the prices now, they're now getting the best demo that is probably the most impactful, right? So you're taking them away from this like big sticker price tag to a, wow, these are so worth it, right? So it's not just a, let me show you all these cool demos right away. It's how can you plan it so it makes the biggest impact with the customer? Plan spontaneity, right? That's really important, is it can't look manufactured there. Right? It should look spontaneous of like, oh my gosh, I actually totally forgot. I got to show you our best demo. I can't believe I almost forgot to show you these. Cut the penny. Really powerful. Okay, let's talk about creating urgency. Creating urgency. Okay, who's ever heard this question? Do you have a card? It's the worst question ever, right? I used to get really frustrated by this question, and I remember going like field training with people, and it just seemed like they never really got asked this question. And for me, it was like I would get to like the end of my demo-ish, right? Like nearing the end, nearing prices, and the customer says, do you have a card? And you're like, son of a gun, right? Like, dang it, how do I not have that happen? Because now you can't say no, right? You're like, dang it, now they're about to walk, and how do I save this? And now you're trying to almost like overcome an objection when you don't really need to. So are you gonna hear this question? Yes, we all hear it, but how can you minimize having this question asked specifically at the end of the demo, right? Because it doesn't feel good when you spend 10, 15 minutes with a customer and then they're like, cool, do you have a card, right? So why are they asking this question, by the way? Well, one, it's a good question. It means they're interested. It means that you built value in the product and that they like the idea of it. But they're also asking it because they have no reason to believe that it's in their best interest to buy it today. Right? They have no reason to believe that. They're like, cool, well, I'll have this someday. Everyone thinks they're going to get Cutco someday. They have to understand that it's in their best interest to buy it today. Right? So how do you create urgency? Again, they have to know that it's in their best interest, not yours. Cutco is about them, not you. It's okay to share a goal if it's placed strategically, okay? But it has to be for them. What's in it for them? It can't be, hey, we're really trying to break this record and it'd be awesome if you could just get it today because it'll really help us in our goal and blah, blah, blah. No, it's what's in it for them. How is it gonna benefit them to buy it today, okay? We'll talk a little bit more about how to build that interest in today. Let's talk about the 5-pay. This is not new news. We've learned about the 5-pay since our first day in training, but this is a really easy way to create more just like acceptance to be able to buy it today, right? So 5-pay all day, this pre-handles the objection of we weren't really planning on it, right? Whoever has met a customer that walks up to the booth and they were like, man, I was hoping we were gonna run into a Cutco booth today. Nobody. Oh, Roger has, I guess. That's awesome. Okay? Yeah, it just doesn't really happen. what do people say? They're like, we weren't really expecting this today. So like, do you have a card? Right? So when you present the 5 pay the right way, this pre-handles that objection and it creates urgency today. So here's the phrasing that I like to use. So Mrs. Jones, what's really cool that we do here at the event, and again, you don't need to try to write this down, it'll be in the script. What's really great that we do this, what we do here at blank event, is because we know that most people don't come here expecting to see Cutco. Like, I've been doing this for 8 years. I've never met one person that, told me that they woke up and they were like, yep, today's the day we're spending $4,000 on knives. They always laugh. So what we do at the event is we allow you to split it up over 5 months interest-free. So there's no interest, there's no credit check, nothing weird like that. It's literally just using Cutco's money for free for 5 months. So all it is $710 today. You get everything right away, and then you just have 4 more payments of $710. So that way, it just allows you to take advantage of an event special without having to pay more for the same product later. Right? It just allows you to take advantage of an event special without having to pay more for the same product later. Right? That goes off in their head where they're like, oh, cool, they are speaking to me because I didn't come here expecting this. Right? I didn't come here planning on spending $4,000 on knives, and I don't want to pay more later, so there is an incentive for me to buy today. Right? So you got to talk about the 5 pay in a way that it's advantageous to them. Okay? Using phrases like today very frequently. Okay, so throughout your demo, not just at the end, but using the word today all the time. So Mrs. Jones, one of the specials that we have today, Mrs. Jones, one of the reasons that we're doing so well at this event today is because of blank. The reason why so many customers choose to take advantage of our, farmers markets specials today are blank, right? Just using that phrase today over and over will just subconsciously put it in the customer's mind of like, oh yeah, this could be something I pull the trigger on today, right? Not in the future, someday. It's like, oh, other people are doing this today? Everyone likes to be like everyone else, right? People don't like being an outcast or like on their own. People like being like other people. So if other people are doing this today, maybe I will too, right? So using today very often. Okay? The last little phrase I want to give you to create urgency around today, again, you'll see this in the script, so you don't need to try to write it down real quick. But in the closing line, one of my favorite phrases to be able to create that urgency is, well, like if you can tell you're on the right package, by the way. If you can tell you're on the right set, they like it, but they haven't just like thrown their credit card at you, because that doesn't ever happen, right? A way to like transition the, hey, what's in it for you today is, so Mrs. Jones, if you do like the idea of checking this off the list, it's my job to make it worth your while to take advantage of the Cutco special. So do you guys want to see some of the extra things I'm doing for my clients who choose to take advantage of the special here at the event today? Right? I'm asking for permission. Curtis talked about that yesterday, right? Or I think it was Curtis. But you're asking for, maybe it was Brandon. You're asking for permission to be able to show them, right? So they have to be getting something extra, like, oh, she's going to go on top of the Cutco discount, she's going to go out of her way to get me something extra, right? So using phrases like that. Okay? All right, let's review this really quick. Oh, we already talked about that. You'll get that in the script, so we'll skip through that. Okay, so let's review really quick. What do we talk about? Number 1, creating the emotional buy-in. Got to make the customer want the product, or else it's logical, they don't want it, right? Makes sense, but they're good. Got to make them want the product. Second thing, intentional value adds when and where. Making sure that you are not just, saying things to say them. You're saying them for the impact that you want the customer to have. And then the third thing, creating urgency. They have to understand what's in it for them and why it's in their best interest, right? Okay. I'll wrap up with this. I just want to pose this question to you because, we've, I think, already been asked some version of this question. You will be asked some version of this question, today or tomorrow. What's next for you? What is your main focus leaving this event? Right? Maybe it's like me, where it's like, man, I do not know my script. You might know it, right? You might say you know it, but it's like if someone were to quiz you, would you actually be able to say it word for word without having to think about it? Right? That's what it was for me. Maybe you're just like, I need to nail my script. Maybe you know your script and you just need to create emotional buy-in for the customer. Maybe it's learning when to say the right things or whatever, right? Maybe it's from another message, right? Cookware from Bird or, kitchens or whatever, right? The last thing I'm going to leave you with is my script. Okay, before I share this with you, I do want to just mention, I think we are going to hand out a physical copy in a minute as well. I just want to mention, take this script however you want. If you are like, I need a new script and I want something that works, go for it. I've had people use it and they really like it. But just know, you don't have to completely reinvent your script. There might be things in this script that we'll hand out that will be really helpful for creating the emotional buy-in, right? So you can plug and play things into the script you're already using if you want. I will also say the script is very knife set heavy. It doesn't have much other than the knife sets, right? It doesn't have a lot of the power intro stuff that Matt talked about yesterday. So you can get some of that stuff and add it in there as well, okay? They're gonna hand out a physical copy, but if you want a PDF copy, because everyone loses paper, go ahead and scan that, and now you'll have it on your phone. Okay, let's go sell some Cutco to some new customers. Thank you.